Welcome to our deep dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear. Um, it seems like everyone's talking about it these days, right? Tiny changes, 1% improvements.
Yeah, it's really captured the zeitgeist, hasn't it?
It has, but what's the substance behind all the hype? That's what we're here to find out. We've got the book itself, of course,
Mhm.
and a whole stack of research and real-world examples to help us really understand what makes this book tick.
I think for me, at least, one of the things that makes Atomic Habits so appealing is that it takes this idea of, massive success and breaks it down into something manageable, right? Like instead of feeling overwhelmed by this huge goal,
Totally.
you can just focus on these tiny, almost insignificant actions.
Ah,
But as Clear argues, those actions, when repeated consistently, they can compound into really remarkable results.
It's like that quote everyone's sharing, right? Success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations. But how do you actually make those daily habits stick? That's where the book gets really interesting for me. It's not just inspirational fluff, right? It's packed with practical strategies based on scientific research and real-life examples.
One of the core concepts, I think, is that habit loop.
Yeah.
It's a framework for understanding how habits actually work.
Mhm.
It breaks down a habit into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward.
Okay.
Essentially, a cue triggers a behavior.
Right.
The craving is the motivation behind the behavior. The response is the action itself. And the reward is the reinforcement that kind of strengthens the habit.
Makes sense.
This loop helps explain why we do the things we do, both the good and the bad.
So let's say your cue is walking into the kitchen after a long day, right? You see a bowl of fruit on the counter, but also that leftover birthday cake in the fridge. The cue is the same, being in the kitchen. But your craving, whether it's for something healthy or a sugary treat, will determine your response, grabbing the apple or going for the cake. And then, of course, comes the reward, the satisfaction of a healthy snack or that instant gratification of that sugary hit.
And as you go through this loop repeatedly, the connections in your brain actually strengthen. The cue becomes more easily associated with the craving. The response becomes more automatic, and the reward becomes more anticipated.
Yeah.
This is how habits become ingrained, almost operating on autopilot. It's fascinating how much of our daily behavior is actually driven by these unconscious patterns.
Yeah, it's almost scary to think about how much we're on autopilot, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the good news is once you understand how this habit loop works, you can start to use it to your advantage, right? You can design your environment to make good habits easier and bad habits harder. You can change your responses to cues by becoming more aware of your cravings and finding healthier ways to satisfy them. And you can make sure good habits are rewarding so they stick.
One of the key insights, I think, from Atomic Habits is that our environment plays a huge role in shaping our habits.
I agree.
Clear argues that we're more like architects of our environment than we are victims of it. We can actually design our surroundings to make it easier to make the right choices.
Okay.
So if you want to eat healthier, for example, make healthy food more visible and accessible in your kitchen.
Right.
If you want to read more, keep a book by your bedside table. If you want to exercise more, have your workout clothes laid out and ready to go.
It's like that saying, out of sight, out of mind, but flipped around is in sight, top of mind.
Exactly.
It's making those cues for good habits so obvious that you almost can't ignore them.
Exactly. And conversely, you can make cues for bad habits less obvious. So if you're trying to reduce your screen time, keep your phone in another room or put it in a drawer when you're working. If you're trying to eat less junk food, don't keep it in the house. The less you see those temptations, the less likely you are to act on them.
It's fascinating how much power our environment has over us. And it's not just the physical environment, right? It's also the digital environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about social media, for example. Those platforms are designed to keep us scrolling, constantly feeding us with new content and notifications. It's like a digital slot machine, right?
Yeah.
Always offering the possibility of a reward,
Yeah.
a like, a comment, a share.
And as we talked about earlier, that anticipation of a reward triggers dopamine,
Right.
making us feel good and wanting more. So we keep scrolling, keep refreshing, keep checking. And before we know it, we've lost hours of our day to these digital distractions.
So how do we break those bad habits, especially when they're so deeply ingrained and reinforced by our environment? Atomic Habits offers some strategies for that too, right?
Absolutely. One of the key ideas is to focus on making bad habits less attractive. Instead of trying to willpower your way through temptation, you can make it less appealing in the first place.
Right.
For example, if you're trying to reduce your social media, use delete the apps from your phone. Or if that's too drastic, at least turn off the notifications. Make it less visually appealing by switching your phone to grayscale. Make it less convenient by logging out of your account so you have to manually enter your password each time.
It's all about increasing the friction, right?
Yeah.
Making it just a little bit harder to engage in those bad habits. The more effort it takes, the less likely you are to do it, especially when you're tired or stressed.
Another key strategy is to make good habits more satisfying. This taps into that reward part of the habit loop. We're more likely to repeat a behavior if it's followed by a positive feeling or outcome. So think about ways to make those good habits more enjoyable or rewarding. If you want to exercise more, listen to your favorite music or podcast while you work out. If you want to read more, create a cozy reading nook and make yourself a cup of tea. If you want to eat healthier, experiment with new recipes and find healthy meals that you actually enjoy.
This is where the idea of temptation bundling comes in.
Right.
It's about pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
Exactly.
So you only watch your favorite TV show while you're on the treadmill, or you only listen to that addictive podcast while you're cleaning the house.
It's a clever way to leverage your natural inclinations to your advantage. And it's also about being mindful of how you reward yourself. If you're trying to eat healthier, don't reward yourself with a pizza. Find healthier ways to celebrate your wins that align with your goals.
All of this is great for understanding how to break bad habits and build good ones. But Atomic Habits goes beyond that, right? So it delves into this idea of identity-based habits.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. Clear argues that true behavior change often starts with identity change. It's not just about changing what you do, but changing who you believe you are.
Okay, that sounds a bit abstract. Can you give us an example?
Sure, think about someone who wants to quit smoking. If they simply focus on behavior, not smoking, they're relying on willpower, which can be easily depleted. But if they shift their identity to, I am a non-smoker, their actions become an expression of that identity. It's no longer about resisting temptation. It's about aligning their behavior with who they believe they are.
So it's like instead of saying, I'm trying to quit smoking, you say, I'm a non-smoker. And that subtle shift in language actually changes your mindset and your actions.
That's the idea. And it applies to all sorts of habits. If you want to be a writer, start identifying as a writer. If you want to be a runner, start identifying as a runner. If you want to be a healthy person, start identifying as a healthy person. Your actions will naturally follow.
So how do you actually make that shift from wanting to be someone to actually being that person?
It starts with believing in the possibility. It's about choosing beliefs and values that support your desired identity, and it's about acting in accordance with those beliefs, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Every time you act in alignment with your desired identity, you reinforce that identity.
It's like you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. And the more votes you cast, the stronger that identity becomes.
Exactly. And as that identity strengthens, it becomes easier to make choices that support it. You start to naturally gravitate towards behaviors that align with who you believe you are.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? Your actions shape your identity, and your identity shapes your actions. It's a positive feedback loop.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of small wins comes in. Clear emphasizes the importance of celebrating your small victories, no matter how insignificant they may seem. Every time you act in alignment with your desired identity, you're casting a vote for that identity, reinforcing it, and making it more likely that you'll continue to act in accordance with it.
So it's not about waiting for some grand transformation. It's about recognizing and celebrating those small steps in the right direction. It's about acknowledging that even tiny actions, when repeated consistently, can lead to significant change.
And those small wins create momentum, they build confidence, and make it easier to stick with your habits over time. They show you that you're capable of change, that you're making progress, even if it's slow and steady.
It's like that quote, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But it's not just about taking that first step. It's about consistently taking small steps in the right direction, day after day. And it's those small steps, those tiny changes, that can ultimately lead to the most profound transformations.
That's the heart of Atomic Habits. It's not about some magical formula or overnight success. It's about understanding the science of behavior change, harnessing the power of small habits, and building systems for continuous improvement.
And it's about believing in your own capacity for growth and change, embracing the journey of self-improvement, and creating a life that is both successful and fulfilling. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first section. We've explored the habit loop, the power of environment, and the concept of identity-based habits. But there's so much more to unpack. I'm excited to dive into some of the more specific strategies and examples from Atomic Habits.
You know, one thing that Clear talks about that I think is super relevant here is this whole idea of talent
Oh, yeah.
and how it relates to habit formation.
I've always been fascinated by that.
Yeah.
Like, is talent something you're born with, or is it something you develop?
That's a great question. And I think Clear kind of challenges the traditional notion of talent, right? He suggests that it's not some innate gift,
Okay.
but rather a result of consistent effort, deliberate practice, and the formation of effective habits.
Interesting.
He argues that what we perceive as talent is often simply a reflection of someone's dedication to a particular craft, their willingness to put in the hours, and their ability to refine their skills through continuous improvement.
So it's not that talented people are just lucky. They've actually created their own luck through years of dedicated practice and habit formation.
Exactly. They've honed their skills, refined their techniques, and built a foundation of success through consistent effort.
And Clear provides some pretty compelling examples to back this up, right? Like he talks about the work of Anders Ericsson,
Yes.
that psychologist who studied expert performers in various fields, from musicians to chess players to surgeons.
Right.
And Ericsson's research found that there was no shortcut to expertise.
None.
It was always a result of deliberate practice, a specific type of practice that focuses on pushing beyond one's comfort zone, identifying areas for improvement, and seeking feedback to refine one's approach.
So it's not just about mindlessly repeating the same thing over and over again. It's about approaching practice with intentionality, focusing on specific skills, and constantly seeking ways to improve.
And this isn't just for, athletes or artists.
No, it's for everyone.
Clear argues that this principle can be applied to any field,
Absolutely.
whether you're trying to improve your writing skills, your public speaking abilities, or your ability to manage your time effectively. The key is to approach practice with intentionality and a commitment to continuous improvement.
It's about embracing this idea of lifelong learning,
Yeah.
constantly seeking out new challenges and opportunities to refine our skills and expand our knowledge.
And recognizing that mastery is not a destination,
Right.
it's a journey,
It is.
a process of continuous growth and refinement.
And I think one of the key elements of that journey is the development of self-awareness.
Oh, for sure.
Clear emphasizes the importance of understanding our strengths and weaknesses, identifying the habits that support our goals, and recognizing the patterns that hold us back. He suggests techniques like journaling, reflection, and feedback from others as helpful tools for cultivating self-awareness and gaining a deeper understanding of our habits and behaviors.
It's about taking the time to really examine our habits, to understand why we do the things we do, and to identify the patterns that are serving us well and those that are holding us back. It's about becoming more mindful of our actions and their consequences, both positive and negative.
And as we cultivate that self-awareness, we can start to make more conscious choices about the habits we want to cultivate and the behaviors we want to eliminate. We can start to design our environment, our routines, and our systems to support our goals and make it easier to live in alignment with our values.
It's about becoming more intentional with our choices, right? Rather than simply reacting to our environment or operating on autopilot.
Exactly. It's about taking control, and that's a powerful idea. Atomic Habits really reminds us that we have the power to shape our habits, our behaviors, and ultimately our destinies.
It does. It gives you this framework for understanding how habits work, harnessing the power of small changes and creating systems for continuous improvement. It's really inspiring.
It is. And it challenges us to kind of embrace the journey of self-improvement, to believe in our own capacity for growth and change,
Yeah.
and to create a life that is both successful and fulfilling.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into atomic habits. We've explored the habit loop. The 4 laws of behavior change the power of environment, the role of identity, and so much more. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it's giving you some ideas for how you can apply these principles to your own life.
Remember, it's not about perfection.
Right.
It's about progress. It's about taking those small steps day after day and trusting that they will eventually lead to meaningful change.
And if you're looking for a practical, insightful, and engaging guide to habit formation, I highly recommend checking out Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a book that has the potential to transform your life, one small habit at a time.